So welcome everybody to this third Sunday of Easter, where we're sharing a little bit on the Road to Emmaus story. This is a great story for this weekend and a great story for those of you who are electing candidates, especially. As I was sharing these stories this week, I really started to make connections with where we are in this journey towards the Easter sacraments, even though we're already almost midway through the Easter season, and it's kind of a difficult thing. But let's look at this gospel from the book from Luke, talking about the road to Emmaus, and see where that brings us. So I know it sounds like a lot, but there's 6 points I want to bring up, and I'll bring each one briefly, I promise. It won't be long. But the first thing we hear about these disciples is 2 of them are walking, and they're walking on a long journey. And we hear long journey, and we think about it in the way that we physically think of a long journey. You know, driving from here to LA, in 3.5 hours is kind of a long journey for some of us. But I just started a new Bible study group, joining, not leading, but I actually joined a Bible study group. And we were reminded that the trip from Jerusalem to Emmaus would have been 7 days. That would have been 7 days of travel walking. And so that whole idea that the disciples are going to walk this whole way back to Emmaus, to home, kind of signifies that they were kind of done with the whole thing back in Jerusalem, and they were just going to head home. But that's 7 days of walking, and so somewhere along this long journey, they encountered this stranger. Now let's look at that long journey. And when I thought about that, and I thought about that in terms of those of you who are electing candidates, realizing that this journey is longer than you planned on it being. This journey has been taking us quite a while, and it will probably still take us a little more of a while to get to those Easter sacraments. And what happens to us on a long journey? On a long journey, it's very easy to get unmotivated. It's very easy to say, let's just turn around and go home. It's very easy to say, let's just stop here for the night and, drive tomorrow. It's very easy to get restless, and it's very easy to get hungry. I don't know how many of you are like this, but when I'm driving, I've got to have snacks, and I've got to have coffee or water, something, not only to fortify me, but because the action fills me up. And especially if I'm drinking hot coffee, I'm going to be more attentive to the road because I'm drinking hot coffee and I'm going to spill it on myself. So we hunger when we're on a long journey. We're longing to arrive at our destination. We're longing to see the people that we plan to see, but we're also just longing to get to the end of that road so that we can be at a place and not be mobile. And I feel, sorry, we changed around here. And I feel for those of you who are in that moment, who are living right now. I apologize, people are coming in, who are living that moment right now of longing, living that moment of saying, when am I going to come in? When am I going to get to those sacraments? Because this journey is longer than I thought. And that brings me to the second point. When the stranger asks, what's going on, and they're going to answer him, there's a great little phrase in there that they stopped looking downcast. They stopped looking downcast. They were sad. They were tired. They were not sure what was happening in this world. And just that feeling of being downcast, I think we were expressing it as we were sharing, as we kind of just shared where we were here and there, that, at this point of being at home all these days, we're starting to get that way. We're starting to feel like, is this ever going to end? Is there ever going to be an end to this journey? Are we ever going to make it to the Easter sacraments? Are we ever going to make it even just to be able to go to the park, or to be able to go, to shop anywhere other than Target, which, even though I love Target, getting a little tired of the same aisles, and I'm longing for Kohl's, and I'm longing for Office Depot, and I'm an office nerd. I'm longing for all these things. And are we ever going to get there? So these disciples are like that, just looking downcast, like, now what? We don't know. But then they decide to start to tell their story. And I kind of imagine them telling their story as if they're telling it like in frustration, like, oh, well, let me tell you, do you not know what's going on? Let me tell you what's going on. This guy, Jesus, he died. The Nazarene, he died, and he went through all these things, and then his disciples are stuck, and now the body's missing, and nobody knows where he is, and the women went to the tomb, and they just kind of blurred out the whole story. And I kind of imagine that in frustration. I can almost hear that. When you get to the point where you're like, up to here, and somebody says, are you okay? And you just kind of explode on them. Am I okay? And you just throw it all out. But at the end, they make a great comment, and they say, we were hoping that he would be the one to rescue Israel. We were hoping. And that statement alone, oops, I apologize. That statement alone says a lot to us. That's where their downcast comes from. That's where this leaving Jerusalem and going back to Emmaus comes from, because they had lost hope. They had the hope. We hoped that's what it was, but oh well, I guess not. And let's just turn around and go. And that's hard because I think, again, we could be in that very place, especially electing candidates. You could get to that very place. What did I do all this for? I was hoping by now I would be receiving communion at the table with my community, with my family. And that's not happening. And that brings us to the fourth point, where after hearing him say all of this, and it seems like he's going to move on, they say three words that mean so much. They say, stay with us. Stay with us. And I think that really needs to be our prayer today. Our prayer, if we're feeling downcast, if we're feeling lost, if we're feeling like I just want to burrow back in the blankets and sleep because who cares? No one would know anyway. That's the words we need to say. Is Jesus, stay with us. Because that's a loaded phrase. That doesn't just mean there, come into our house and sit down and sleep here. It means stay with us. What does Jesus say to the disciples when they ask him about whatever? Come and see. Come with me. That invitation to join is so much more than just a physical invitation, but that invitation to stay in our hearts, to stay with us, to be with us, and to help us through this time. And so they say to him, stay with us, and he does. Now, remember at the very beginning, he started walking with them, and the gospel says, but their vision was blocked. They didn't realize who he was. And we talk about a lot of reasons their vision was blocked. Maybe it was blocked because they were looking downcast, symbolically. They were looking at the floor. They were looking at where their feet were taking them and not at what was happening around them. And they didn't maybe look at him. But also emotionally and spiritually, they were just not in the place. We talked about signs. They weren't in the place to read the sign at that moment. And so the fourth, right before we get to the fourth point, the fifth point, he appeared to them in the breaking of the bread. It was when the bread was broken that they realized who he was and why he was meant to be with them. Their eyes were opened and they finally saw him. And they saw him. And with with the man born blind, we talked about seeing with the eyes and seeing with the mind and the heart. They finally saw him not just with the eyes, but with their hearts. And how do we know that? Because of this wonderful phrase that we use often in church ministry and that I loved. Were not our hearts bursting within us while he talked about the scriptures? Were not our hearts burning? And that is the prayer that I have for us, that we continue to pray for that burning to stay in our hearts, that desire to know more, that hunger to want to see him in the breaking of the bread, physically, when we're able to join again at the table and break bread together, that our hearts will still be burning and that we'll still want him in our presence. All of the readings today talk about hope. Every single one of the readings today somehow mentions hope or the idea of hope. And just this last comment that I want to share with you, something that I just learned in this Bible study that I took this week. Thank you to Brother Silas, who led our Bible study. He may be watching this later on. That hope is not the idea that everything's going to be okay. Hope is recognizing that God is with us right now. And because God is with me right now, I can face whatever's going to come. Whether it be positive or negative, I can face it. I can reach that moment of knowing that the Lord is with me, walking beside me, and that it's going to be okay in the end, some way or another. Quick story, and then I promise I'm done. Years ago, probably it was in the early 90s, I was teaching at Catholic school. And at the time, my godmother, my aunt, who's my mother's eldest sister, was very close to, was in the hospital dying. And we knew that she was dying. It had been a long time of a long illness, and she had been unresponsive and unconscious for quite a while at that point. And she was, we knew it was any day. And so I was in the classroom and I was teaching, and I turn around and I see the principal standing at my door, and I knew that was, how you just know in your heart. I just knew that was it. And he just said, "You need to get to the hospital. I'll take your class. Go." I grabbed my purse, and I remember going down to my car. And I had done this many times before because, as I said, she had a long illness, and I'd been to see her in the hospital. I'd been to see her while she was home bedridden, and usually my prayer was, okay, Lord, give her just a little more time, give her just a little more time. And I remember that day very clearly, getting into my car, and my prayer was, Lord, just let me be able to handle whatever's going to happen. And I didn't recognize it at the time, as we shared before. I didn't recognize it at the time. And it wasn't until I looked back on it that I realized my prayer had changed. Because at that point I knew. And my prayer wasn't, Lord, fix it. It was, Lord, give me that hope that there is something, that I'm going to be able to pass through this day and get over this hump and over this difficult time, and still be able to live and hopefully continue her memory. And he did. And he was with me, and he led me through that most delicate time in my life. One of, I think, the first deaths that really hit me quite hard. But that was hope. That was what hope was for me. That was what I needed at that moment. And that was what God gave me. So that's my prayer for you today on this third Sunday of Easter, as we go forth and reflect on this beautiful story of the road to Emmaus. May we continue to have that hope and recognize that burning in our hearts, and know that one day we will indeed be together. We will indeed celebrate at that table and break bread as one. Have a great Sunday, and blessings to you and your families.